Another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic here with Dylan Burkhart, UM Hoops. Monday morning. Dylan, you look like you're cracking a smile. You got your first shot today. That's the real big news.
Yeah,
Feeling good?
Got a little shot in my arm. The side effects will be hitting, right? Probably like tomorrow night, right as we're going into a 9:57 tip. It's going to be great.
I apologize for violating the HIPAA rules of this podcast.
Throwing me out there.
But I'm happy for you, man. And I got mine scheduled this morning for later this week. So I'm happy. You're happy. We hope that all of you are getting your shots scheduled and get this thing fully vaccinated, and let's get back. So good things on that front, but also good things for Michigan. How was that transition?
That was smoothest transition we've ever had in this podcast. Nailed it.
One game from the Final Four now. Michigan heading to its fourth Elite Eight in 8 years, right? Obviously, massively impressive. We'll go through last night's win over Florida State. We will preview some UCLA here. Quick turnaround, about 36 hours from tip or so. Maybe more than that, but a little 10 p.m. tip-off on Tuesday, which is what everyone wanted to see. So, let's start with last night. What do you think, man? Pretty good. Pretty good showing there.
Pretty good. I think there's been a lot to be impressed with from Juwan Howard over the first 2 years he's been at Michigan, but that was just a coaching clinic, really. I think Michigan was just so prepared, and it was for everything Florida State was going to do on offense and defense, and then executed that plan perfectly. It's the kind of game that it reminded me a little bit of a John Beilein NCAA tournament game where you just see one team so much more prepared and just ready for everything the other team does, and it just wasn't ever really that competitive because Michigan had the perfect game plan. And it wasn't what Michigan does all the time. It was really a wrinkle for this game, and it was a week spent getting ready to execute it, and just Florida State had no answer. We can start on offense or defense, but I was just so impressed with the preparation. Obviously, the stakes are extremely high. You're in the Sweet 16, unique circumstance where you're in this hotel for a week. I would say Michigan being locked in Indianapolis for, 3 weeks now is probably working out pretty well for them. They seem to have that vibe down, that preparation down, and just really impressive from top to bottom as far as winning that game almost before both teams took the court. Yeah.
Let's get into the offense here. I mean, you were talking about these wrinkles and, from layman's perspective, you see these guys, your bigs are just diving to the basket and getting these great clean touches, your Brandon Johns, your Hunter Dickinson, and, attacking the basket, attacking the paint. They're not relying on the threes. I obviously had it wrong as usual, and I said they were going to need to go, quick passes out of the post and kind of, swing that ball around the perimeter for open threes all day. That's what I was envisioning, and instead they just went right at Florida State's length. They controlled the offensive glass. They really, they seemed to perfectly isolate all of the weaknesses that Florida State presented and exploited every last one of them.
Yeah, Florida State wants to play up the line. They want to deny passes. They want to extend pressure, front the post. And Michigan basically came up with a plan to use all of that against them, right? They put so much attention on the ball. And usually, we do think, okay, if a team is going to play over-aggressive defense, the way you beat that is you create some sort of penetration or get the ball inside and then kick it out for threes. And if Isaiah Livers was healthy, maybe that would be more of the game plan we saw. But what Michigan did instead was just incredible off-ball movement all night. And I think Michigan had 22 points just cutting to the basket, which is absurd. Like for a half court, those are just basically dunks, layups, fouls. And basically everyone on the wing, whether it was Brandon Johns, Sean D. Brown, anyone just had great moments cutting to the basket. They were in the right places. people threw the passes that weren't always straightforward passes, but they were there, and it just took a lot of trust, I think, in the game plan, and Michigan just dominated in the paint. They missed a lot of shots around the rim in the first half, but they just kept getting those same shots in the second half, and eventually they just all started going in, and this game was over.
Brandon Johns. Go.
I mean, the first 5 minutes, this was supposed to be a game where it was, can Raekwon Gray take advantage of Brandon Johns? And instead, Brandon Johns just took over the game for the first 5 minutes.
Incredible.
But I don't know what they've been telling him in Indianapolis, but it's worked in a way that nothing else really has throughout his career. He's played the best 3 games of his career back-to-back-to-back games, essentially, with all the pressure in the world.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's all of the talent realized. It's all of the physical gifts just on display. And it, for the first time in a long time, if not ever, at Michigan, you know, it looks like he's playing without thinking. It looks like he's playing on instincts and not second guessing everything he's doing. Like, you think of all those times that you would just kind of see him hesitate every time he touches the ball, or just be perfectly content to perch himself at the 3-point line and like play as if he were like a 6'3" shooting guard, and not this 6'9" hyper athlete, just incredible, you know, natural talent. But he was content to shoot threes, and he kind of played with this passivity, right? Like he just a timidity to him. And now it's just instincts and confidence and, you know, attacking the basket. You see that, like him diving to the like, who can stop him, right? I mean, he can go right up, over, and through pretty much anyone between his leaping ability and his strength. I mean, there is something really special. Like, this is why we all love the college game. I feel like it's because, like, you see, when you get to see talent realized and you get to see work ethic, you know, find its kind of stage. And that's what you're seeing with Brandon Johns. It's a great story.
Yeah. And you say he's not second guessing himself. A big part of that, I think, is that his instincts are actually right. Like, he's locked into the game plan enough on both ends of the court that he's making the right decision first, instead of, like, it's one thing to say he second guessed himself this year, but he made a lot of mistakes when he was on the court, and he couldn't make the right play often enough. I'm really impressed with how they've come up with ways to get him involved. He's drawn 15 fouls in the 4 games he's played as a starter. And he's 20 of 26 at the line. That's about half as many free throw attempts as Isaiah Livers had all season as a starter. How you like that for you? I mean, you've always wanted Isaiah
to get those free throws, baby.
But those fouls really kind of set the tone. They create foul trouble for the other team. And just from when the Ohio State game when he first started, I think his positioning and sense off the ball has improved exponentially, especially like when it goes into Hunter Dickinson on the block and how to leverage. Like, he's not a shooter, right? So he can't just camp in the corner, but Michigan's finding ways to get him the ball on the move where he can draw a foul or go up strong and try to finish. So just really good stuff all around. I do think, and this is the one maybe concern, the last 3 matchups have been really pretty good for him defensively. I think UCLA, and we'll get to them more later, but it's going to be the most sort of perimeter-oriented defensive assignment he's had in a while, and that'll kind of test some of his – it's one thing to be able to defend when someone's just driving at your chest. Like, that's a really easy, like, wall him up and be big, right? He can do that. It's another thing when a team's going to work you off the ball a little more, when you're going to have to keep track of shooters, and that's the one area I think where Michigan's kind of got a pass in the NCAA tournament just because of how the matchups have gone. So that's one thing to keep an eye on as we move forward. But he's been so good.
And in those 3 matchups, you know, he's playing basically 25 minutes a game. Like, I don't, hypothetically, if they were playing different matchups, maybe he's not playing 25 minutes a game, right? Like, maybe it would be more of a, you know, maybe go a little bit smaller, maybe more reliance on Shawnee Brown, right? I mean, like that. And that's the thing about this Michigan team, is it can kind of shape shift in any way that it needs to, even without Isaiah Livers.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. It's definitely, they can't shape shift to the extent that we talked about in February, but there are still a few options to pull, and there's still a lot of talent on the floor, and that's what we've seen. If you were to go back and watch how, I just thought Michigan played pretty timid offensively against Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't look like they had a game plan that they really embraced. And obviously that was a 24-hour prep. They just learned about Isaiah, but the sort of sharpness to how they're playing on offense over these last couple games has really stood out to me, just as far as rediscovering some of that belief in yourself, even when you're without one of your key pieces.
Yeah, I thought my two key plays from John's weren't his scoring. It's just the extra stuff that he can give you. That little when UCLA got it down to 5 or 6. Florida State got it down to 5 or 6. 15-minute mark or so, the second half. I could look at they were maybe ready to make a push, and you had that Mike Smith 3-point play. Then you had Brandon Johns make that high-low pass to Austin Davis for a layup, and then next possession, missed shot. Johns comes flying out of nowhere, saves the ball from out of bounds, kicks it to Brooks. Brooks kicks it to Austin Davis. Another layup, 7-0 run, game's over, right?
Yep.
And that activity that Johns gives you is just huge.
And we just talked about the fact that Michigan put this game away with Austin Davis on the court for an extended shift in the second half, and
Michigan outscored them by 18 points in his 8 minutes on the floor.
Yeah, he just it was funny because in the last game I joked that Juwan was getting a little risky leaving him in after the under 12 timeout. He did again and just crushed it. He was really comfortable, I think, in this sort of interior passing the game. He did a great job sealing and finishing, and he almost is better at that in some respects, especially against the front, than Hunter Dickinson is, just with his ability to kind of create space with his body. Even on key plays in that stretch where someone else scored, Davis was just constantly sealing the paint. Hunter Dickinson did a good job of that all game too, but that was just great game plan all around. And I just think that guys like Austin Davis, Brandon Johns stepping up in this moment is pretty telling for what Juwan Howard tried to build all season, right? He gave those guys opportunities, and he really stuck by them and swore up and down they were going to be impact players at a certain point. And then to see that come to fruition in the Sweet 16, it's pretty good stuff.
What do you think about Juwan leaving Dickinson in after picking up that first foul? What was it this? It's 16 minutes left in the first half. I was pretty surprised there.
With just his first, it was just one foul.
I know, but
I think that
3 or 4 minutes in,
John Beeline doing that, whatever, for however many years, to taught people that you should just take someone out if they commit a foul.
I'm not saying
early.
he should have. I'm saying I'm surprised that he didn't.
I think he's been doing a good job of getting that 30-minute mark out of Hunter, and I thought that was good. I don't know. I didn't think that they should have took him out there, or I wasn't even that surprised.
I was a little bit surprised. What other takes do you have on this game? What about on the defensive side for Michigan?
So we knew going into the game, Florida State was going to just run basically a continuity ball screen offense. The key thing that stood out in the scouting report
was continuity ball screen offense just means shitty shots and bad turnovers?
No, continuity ball screen offense means it's just a flow, right? Everyone can initiate the ball screen, and then if there's nothing there, you reverse it and you go to another dribble handoff, around and around and around.
Right.
What stood out on the scouting report is they don't have a Cam Thomas or a Javonte Smart who you put in a ball screen and gets his own bucket. They have a lot of guys who can maybe get downhill and pass, or can maybe stand in the corner and shoot to play off the ball screen. But in the end, they didn't have that one guy who's going to just go and get you 20 on tough pull-up shots. And Michigan's entire defense has been designed to funnel teams into those shots. And so that really played into, I think, Michigan's hands. Michigan iced a ton of ball screens. If you think of that basically funnels everything into a two-man game, right? So icing means that you force the ball handler to reject the screen and force him toward the sideline. And Michigan did a great job of that. That's something that Illinois did to Michigan really well when Illinois played in Ann Arbor. And that just kind of took Florida State out of everything they wanted to do. They didn't have confidence to shoot. Michigan played off Scotty Barnes quite a bit. They put Hunter Dickinson on Scotty Barnes, which I found pretty hilarious given how well Juwan knows Scotty Barnes and that he played with his sons. And it's just like kind of the ultimate sign of disrespect. And Scotty Barnes wasn't out there looking to shoot either. So I thought that was telling. Just a great game plan all around. Michigan had to do well in transition. They did the job in transition. Michigan had to score off turnovers. They did that. And you had to clean up the defensive glass. And they did all that. And that's how you win a postseason game.
Yeah. And Florida State certainly did not do itself any favors. It needed to kind of, whatever you want to call it, value its possessions or do whatever. And I mean, there were just so many just bad, quick shots, so many there were unforced turnovers. And, you saw a level of execution, at least coming out of the halftime, and Michigan just slapped them back immediately. Really, I mean, the only word's impressive. That you just keep coming back to it. That did not think that game was going to be that easy, and it wasn't easy. But they made it. They sure as shit made it look easy. Yeah,
I just think going into the game, what I wrote, and I wrote way too much previewing this game, but both of these teams there were reasons to think both could be they both really set up well, I thought, to defend the other team. Right. Mm-hmm. Michigan's defense matched Florida State's offense well, and Florida State's defense, you could see it giving Michigan problems. Michigan had the answers, and Florida State just never did. So the game swung because Michigan could score, I think, against Florida State. But because I could have easily seen this being one of those, when these two teams played in 18, it was just a slugfest, right? Neither team could create anything offensively. And then it was just execution down the stretch. The difference in this game was Michigan's defense was great, but the offense just kind of ran away with it against a team that is usually pretty good defensively. And there's just only so much you can say. It was just a great plan, execution all around.
Yeah, I mean, off of this game, one thing that I don't think that should really be taken for granted is just how unique. I know we talked about this early in the year because, this is what you do. You repeat talking points and things like that. But it just really struck me yesterday, the makeup of this team and it, just having all these just guys who are older or who stuck around or who, just they seem to just be able to play with such continuity and a guy like Austin Davis, he's been in the program for 5 years. Brandon John's been in the program for 3 years. Eli Brooks, 4 years. And then for Shawnee Brown and Mike Smith, they come in, right? They totally just own their roles. They didn't startle things at all. They totally bought into what they needed to do, which that doesn't always happen with grad transfers. And I'm just it just bears reminding is all I'm saying is that this is a really unique team in terms of how it's built that is not really replicable, is not it's such a unique, there's no blueprint. It's such a unique thing that has come together that it reminds me a little bit of the Villanova Final Four teams that had guys who redshirted, right? That stuck around through these years and got older. It reminds me of some of those, the Virginia team that won the title that had guys who you just don't get that long and things like that. You know what I mean?
So I have a little bit of a different take. Mm-hmm. I think it's more about roster building than about continuity or sticking with it. If you look at 8 Michigan players played rotation minutes in that game. And Juwan Howard brought in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the 8.
Are you counting Franz?
Yeah, including Franz. They're all new players to his program in the last 18 months or whatever, or 24 months or whatever it is.
Right.
So, and they're from basically every different place, right? And they somehow fit together. And I think that is really like, it's not like all these guys have been like, obviously, like you can use Brandon Johns or Austin Davis as an example, and they both had key moments, but to be able to build a team that fits together this well when it came from basically all over the place. Like a year ago, we were talking about Josh Christopher and Isaiah Todd and all of this. And instead it's Mike Smith and Sean D. Brown who are playing in the Elite Eight. And that's really the story to me, is that this team fits together so well, despite the fact that it was basically cobbled together from all over the damn place.
Well, yeah. And then you had guys stick around though. Franz could have left last year. Isaiah could have left last year. Like, guys got left with lesser draftable profiles, whatever. But you get an extra year out of each of those guys. Dickinson is extremely old as a freshman, and I think
Franz Wagner's young as a sophomore, though.
Yeah, but he also played professionally in Germany. Like, yeah,
it's an interesting.
I'm just saying it's an extremely interesting mix of just guys who have been around a while. I mean, I think I had it yesterday, like their top 6 have combined for over 600 college basketball games. Like, to be able to have the mix of what was left behind with what Juwan has added with the 2 grad transfers this year, like it's really impressive. Like, the thing that got me thinking about it is like people talking about Mike Woodson in Indiana or all these other schools that have an opening, and they're like, oh, let's bring in, a guy who's similar to Juwan Howard's profile and pair him with an experienced assistant. I'm like, look, that you can try to copy that, which is ridiculous in and of itself, because those are all unique individuals that have worked out. But like, the thing that can't be replicated is like this Michigan team.
Yeah, I'm interested though. Like, recruiting is going to change significantly in the next. Like, it's changing right now. It's going to change even more as this transfer portal thing goes around. And like, the secret sauce could be if you can it's two data points, right? Sean D. Brown and Mike Smith, but they're also 2 basically home run transfer commitments in a world where people hit like 12% on transfers.
Exactly.
Most transfers are not what people think. So that's the most interesting thing to me, is how much of what we're seeing with this team comes down to not luck, but like hitting your number when it comes up, or is it really a situation where Juwan Howard might be a lot more? Juwan Howard's really figured something out as far as roster building and evaluation, and like his early data points are pretty much home runs, I would say. Yeah. At the same time, if No-Gel Eastern, Josh Christopher, and Isaiah Todd were on this team, like, I don't know what this team would be. So some of that stuff is hard to kind of parse out, but the early return, it'll be really interesting how that all plays out this offseason, because that's going to be really telling, and it's going to be a completely different roster next year where you have 5 freshmen who all are going to want to play. Like, that's going to be a different roster management situation entirely. But
it is inordinately rare for the grad transfers to work the way Shawnee Brown have. It's even more rare for the up transfer like Mike Smith to work out. And I was thinking about that this weekend, writing about Tyson Walker at Michigan State and watching, his stuff on Synergy. And, last year I'm watching Mike Smith. I'm like, well, that won't work in the Big Ten. That won't work in the Big Ten. And lo and behold, it has worked. And now I'm watching Tyson Walker, and, I see Michigan State fans are already, penciling this guy in as a stud starting point guard. And I think he will be the starting point guard. I don't know if he'll be a stud. We'll find out. Could be. But like,
probably depends who's next to him.
For sure. But like, don't use Mike Smith as the comp there. Like, it just doesn't work because Mike Smith is the outlier.
Yeah. And
he's a completely different player.
Franz Wagner, Isaiah Livers, and Hunter Dickinson next to him. So that's also the secret sauce to your grad transfers working out, is you have to ask them to do some limited subset of what they think they can do. If you're asking them to do everything they think they can do, well, I got news for you. They're probably not going to be able to carry your whole team, right? Michigan needs Mike Smith to make key plays in key spots. They don't need Mike Smith to carry them to wins every game. And that's why they've been so effective. So that's for sure part of the mix in that regard.
Yeah. You have anything else on Florida State you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we're moving on. We got.
Do you have UCLA content up yet?
I have a post that's going to go up after I post this podcast. So I've done a little bit of research last night.
We'll do a quick recap on UCLA. They entered the NCAA tournament on a 4-game losing streak. Looked pretty dead in the water. Before that, they were 17-5 overall, 13-3 in the Pac-12, and kind of cruising along. Then obviously hit that stumbling block on the way out. And actually, when you go back and look at it, they lost to 3 NCAA tournament teams in their last 3 regular season games: Colorado, Oregon, and USC, and then lost to Oregon State, who is in the Elite Eight.
Yeah, that's 4 NCAA tournament teams
in the Pac-12 championship game, or in the Pac-12 opening tournament game. In the NCAAs, they've gone through Michigan State, BYU, Abilene Christian, and most recently Alabama in overtime on Sunday night.
So if we would have known before the first 4 that the Pac-12 was actually the second best league in college hoops, maybe the best league in college hoops, maybe we would have previewed it differently. Instead, we just shit on Mick Cronin for 15 minutes and moved on.
I saw this coming from the Bruins.
I can't say anyone has. It's a lot to unpack with this team. I think they are living a little bit of a charmed life in the postseason.
Sure.
Teams are shooting 64% at the line against them in the NCAA tournament, 24% from 3. Alabama, only one team shot better than 25% from 3-point range against them. And 3 of their 4 opponents have shot worse than 60% at the line.
So is this the ghost of John Wooden, that they went to Mackey Arena, they picked up some pixie dust from the statue, and they've just been rolling ever since? Should Michigan be worried that it won't be able to hit the goddamn broadside of a barn?
I mean, then Tuesday they sprinkled it all over Alabama, and they shot 11 of 25 at the line and 7 of 28 from 3. I mean,
possibly bad. Yeah, from a team that can score the ball.
Yeah. So I don't know what's going on with all that, but it's just one game, and that's how shooting works. If you make shots, you win. If you miss, you don't, right? And it's simple as that, really. I assume if we went back and looked at those games they lost late in the year, other teams made threes, they didn't, and that's kind of the game. So that it's not like they've been just blowing teams out, right? They beat Michigan State in overtime, a game they lose if Aaron Henry boxes out on a free throw.
They were down, 5, 2 minutes to go or something in that game?
Yeah, they beat BYU, who, I don't know. I mean, it's not like they beat a high major team in that spot. And then they got Abilene Christian, and then they won a game in overtime against Alabama, who missed 14 free throws. Like, right. It's not like they're playing out of their mind and at some elite level, but at the same time, they're figuring out ways to win. They present difficult challenges, I think, matchup-wise for Michigan, and they're a disciplined enough team to control the game, right? This is going to be a transition defense team that, like, Michigan basically had a baked-in advantage in its first 3 games because the other teams they played were so dependent on transition offense. And, like, a good transition defense always beats a good transition offense. And Michigan would take that away, and that made it really hard for those teams in the half court. UCLA is going to be more than content to play a Big Ten type of game, right? 62 possessions, whatever. They'll be fine with that. And so I do think it'll be played mostly in the half court.
Yeah, I mean, muck it up is kind of a cliche, but do you think that classification works here?
I don't know about muck it. Like, I don't know if they're particularly physical. They're just going to play transition defense and play a half court game, right? They're not going to get out and run on offense or defense. They're 313th in average possession length offensively, according to Ken Pom. So They're going to run their stuff. What's tricky is this team just loves fucking mid-range jump shots, and that's what they do. I have the stat here. I have a graph I'm putting up, but they're top 5 in mid-range attempts per game, or like rate of mid-range shots, and top 5 in mid-range accuracy. Right. So they just shoot a bunch of mid-range shots, and they make them at a level where you have to guard them. So what does that mean if you're Michigan and your whole defense is designed to give that shot up, right? Like it's sort of the Rutgers paradigm where, okay, well, we're giving up exactly what you want to do. We still think it's a bad shot, but you're used to taking it and making it. So it's a little bit of a weird mismatch in that sense.
Interesting. Personnel wise, you break it down for, I have not scouted UCLA. Don't even remember them from the Michigan State game.
So basically you have Tiger Campbell, small point guard, run the show, hit some mid-range shots, not much of a 3-point shooter. And then they go 6'6", 6'6", 6'6" at the 2-3-4 with Juzang, Jaquez, and Bernard. And all those guys can make threes. They don't shoot a ton of them. They can all create off the bounce, and they're all pretty versatile as far as like isolation scorers, just kind of versatile, do-it-all scorers, right?
Sure.
A little bit like you have questions there, right? How does Eli Brooks match up with a guy who's taller than him? How does Brandon Johns match up with a guy who's smaller than him? Sean D. Brown is a pretty good answer to maybe fill in some of the gaps there because he fits that defensive profile. But, I mean, these guys have just been playing out of their mind in that NCAA tournament, right? Like, it's not just that other teams are missing free throws and threes. These guys are just filling it up with tough contested shots. I think it was Jaquez in the Michigan State game. Like, Juzang's had a game. Like, they're just on fire. And, I mean, Juzang had 27. I thought Jaquez had, 13, but he had some big shots late. Or, no, Juzang had 27 against BYU. They've just been, like, on fire. And a lot of it is tough, create your own shot, go get a bucket, right?
The opposite of Florida State, in that they're not going to be throwing the ball all over the place. Like, they take great care of the ball. They do not turn it over. There's not nearly as many unforced errors, things like that. Like, I feel like in those last two games, especially, Michigan was able to kind of win a little bit with its discipline. Like, Michigan is a team that can play fast, right? And can play an exciting brand of basketball, but does so without losing itself, you know? And UCLA, not the same, but similar in that sense.
Yeah, UCLA is not going to throw the game away. Right. They're not just going to run they're not going to like be too aggressive in transition or throw out some weird, funky defense or anything else. So it's a game you're going to have to execute to win. That's how I would put it, right? Like, you have to beat them. They're not going to beat themselves.
You made a really good point when we were talking about Alabama that, you know, okay, you get an 11 seed, right, in this game. Well, you don't expect it to be an 11 seed that has a bunch of former top 50 recruits on it and shit like that, right? And that is what UCLA is. Like, the seed doesn't really match what's there on paper. And I mean,
they're up to 16th on KenPom.
Right. I mean, and I was watching the game last night wondering, like, you know, is Alabama a better matchup for Michigan or is UCLA? Alabama's pretty damn good, but in terms of just lining it up for 40 minutes against Michigan, I don't know if UCLA is actually a little bit of a tougher matchup in terms of style, in terms of, you know, matchups or whatever. I don't know.
I still think you'd rather play the team that is really good at making mid-range jumpers instead of the team that can hit 18 threes in a game. And Alabama's just better defensively. Alabama's plenty talented in its own right. I think if you're Michigan, you're fine to see a UCLA team that, I mean, at some point they're going to have a bad shooting game. They're not, I don't know. I think you're happy with the matchup if you're Michigan. And I think the big question that we haven't even got to, like, we haven't even said,
for the record, I mean, it's not like UCLA is making threes at a high clip. I mean, they're shooting okay from behind the arc, but they're not like they made 9, 7, and 10 threes. So obviously,
they shot 50%, 42%, 37%, 35% from three. Those are all like they've made. I mean, they're making 8.5 a game. That's pretty good 3-point shooting for a team that doesn't actually shoot that many threes. And it's more that the other team they've played haven't made any threes.
So it's looking like they made 21 threes combined in those during that 4-game losing streak.
Yeah, so
I was just saying that they're not like making like 12 threes a game or anything like that, like anything crazy that they're just like completely in some fever dream or anything like that. That's all I was saying.
No, and that's fair. The big question with all this, like, I just don't think there's nothing on their statistical profile that you're like, oh, wow, that's bad news for Michigan, right? They don't dominate the game in any way. They're just like a pretty good high major team. And obviously there's talent on there. Like, the biggest thing probably is that they just have actually talented players who have proved that they can just make plays in big spots. We hadn't even talked about Hunter Dickinson this whole podcast, I don't think, which is kind of hilarious because like, I don't know if you were game planning for Michigan, what's the right move? In the NCAA tournament, these teams have basically just sold out their entire game plan to try to take Dickinson away. And I kind of feel like maybe the better option defensively is to make him beat you. I don't know what UCLA will do. They're on film. They double the post sometimes. They single cover the post sometimes. Cody Riley's a pretty good post defender, but that's sort of the $1 million question because I feel like teams have almost, and the minute you say this, he's going to go for like 25 and just dominate. And sure. UCLA is not a team that's going to make it like impossible to throw it into the post like Florida State. They're not going to really deny and do all that. So they'll play behind him. They'll let him catch the ball, and sometimes they'll bring a double. Sometimes they won't. Cody Riley's a good defender. He's still 6'9", 255. He's not like a 7-footer, right? So I don't know how that matchup plays out, but that's the big question and how much pressure UCLA brings and how that changes as the game goes on.
I think you hit on it, that it's the latter. It's give them that option and make Dickinson do it. Now, I also don't know quite enough about UCLA's like reserve personnel to know how deep they can go into their bench with just bodies that can play the post in case you have fouls.
They're not deep.
But if you look at the Ohio State game, for instance, right? Now I know that was right coming off of the Livers thing, but Dickinson had 14 2-point attempts in that game, and Michigan scored under 70 points. The Michigan State game 2 games before that, he had 10 field goal attempts, right? They scored 64 points. Like, there aren't many ties that bind when it comes to similarities in Michigan's losses, but 1 for 8 against Illinois, right? 4 for 10 against Michigan State, 9 for 14. It's not the amount that he makes, it's the amount that he takes, it feels like, as something that you could at least tie together as, maybe that is right. And I would agree that end of the day, 3 is more than 2. So make him play through them, or make them play through him, and sell out for 40 minutes that way. I do think that might be, especially when you're an underdog, like you don't have much going for you. Go with that.
Yeah. The way I would predict it plays out is UCLA opens the game kind of like daring him to score a bit and plays one-on-one for at least a few possessions, but then changes up coverages kind of here and there throughout the game to try to keep him confused. What I'll say, though, is it's one, like, if you're a team like Florida State that lives to double the post and trap and get deflections, it's a lot easier to make things difficult than if you're a UCLA team that doesn't really force any turnovers, just kind of packs it in. It's sort of like when you see a Big Ten defense try to double, and it's not really that scary, right? It comes from the right place. You make the right read. And I think Dickinson has gotten better at that, and playing these last few games against teams that really play a more all over the place style has helped him probably continue to develop some of his ability to pass out of those situations. So that's just really the big factor, because I think there's a chance that Dickinson just dominates this game, especially if UCLA plays it straight up. And that's really just the one thing that I don't really see an answer for on the UCLA roster. Like if Cody Riley gets 2 fouls, they basically have Mac Etienne, who is a reclass, who joined the team in January and has not played in the last 2 games. So like they don't want to play him, but they don't really have another option to go big. But at the same time, if you remember the Michigan State game, it all changed when UCLA went really small. And that's the other thing that Michigan might have to deal with, and might be the way that UCLA causes some issues for a Michigan team that doesn't really want to play 5 out by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. Can I ask you the question that matters the most?
What's that?
What is your take on the no call charge at the end of UCLA Alabama?
I hate after pass flop charges like that. I was all for not calling it.
The no call, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a bullshit play. And that
for a team that's all of takes out there. I all I see is people who all year complain about there's too many charges, complaining that they didn't call the charge. Like, what?
I hate that call. Or like when they make that call.
That would have been a horrific call.
Yeah. And it's a call that
now, if he had the ball in his hands and was trying to score and ran over him like that, yes.
I agree. But if ball's out and then you like gently bump into someone and they flop, that's just, we don't need that. I don't need any of that in my life.
Yeah. I see people complaining about, the lack of consistency of the charge call. The consistency needs to be not making the charge call. So let's celebrate the fact that it was not called.
Yeah, I tend to agree. How do you feel about every Mike Smith charge call ever? I would be incredibly tilted if I was playing against him. He's picked up a charge in all 3 NCAA tournament games, and the one completely changed the game against Florida State.
The one yesterday was a joke.
The one against LSU was similar.
He's sliding down the lane again on a transition break. He's gets run over because he's 5'4".
To his credit, he knows how to get that call, and
absolutely
it's come up huge in key spots for Michigan in the postseason.
All that Big Ten game film. He said, "Oh, look at this bullshit that they call in this league. I'll do this all day." Watching Brad Davison picked up some tips.
Oh boy! So, what do you think? There's like a weird vibe of this game where if you're Michigan, are you feeling off the hook to play an 11 seed? I don't really worry about that.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't worry about it internally with Michigan, but there are like those just weird things that happen in the tournament, right? And we sat here and we were, oh my goodness, Michigan versus LSU. This is a bad matchup, blah, blah, blah. They boat race, Then Florida State. This could be a matchup. I'm picking Florida State in my original bracket, blah, blah, blah. Michigan rolls. Now comes UCLA, and this game is going to come down to like the last possession. And do they win? I don't know. But I will say I don't know if it's going to be easy. I think this might be the hardest game since losing in the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup. I tend to think that Michigan's just the much better team.
On paper, they should win by 20.
Well, no, on paper they should win by like 6 or 7, I would say. But you got to hit some shots, and like I worry a little bit. Like Michigan only made 3 threes against Florida State, and if
you're putting that voodoo on them,
if they play a team that makes them beat them with the 3, I feel like that's where Michigan gets the most uncomfortable in games. They've been a little indecisive kind of against teams that go under everything or dare them to shoot. And Franz Wagner was fantastic against Florida State, but he could not buy a 3. And at some point you're going to need to hit some of those shots. And they did hit those shots against LSU, who just didn't really care to play defense, but that'll be key. Cause I do think the way UCLA plays, they're going to play way more packed in than what Michigan's seen for a while. And that'll can Mike Smith kind of unlock that with some kick out passes and all that. So it's an interesting spot. I think you have to like Michigan just based on how they're playing. And I feel like UCLA is just getting a little lucky in this run.
Could be. The question is going to be whether they get one more game of luck in them.
It's a lot of luck.
Seen it before.
Yeah. I mean, anything can happen. It's one game.
Do you have anything else you want to dabble in? I think we will be doing we should do a whole coaching carousel podcast in and of itself, right?
Yeah, when this is all over. Or
when this is done.
The other regional final, a little upset watch there with USC.
Did we come up with a bet here?
No,
we were texting last night.
You're going to try to bet me straight up on a gigantic upset.
You come out of nowhere off the top rope saying USC is going to unsolicited takes that USC is going to beat Gonzaga, and I say I disagree, and I will bet whatever you want.
I think it's a sneaky spot. I think USC has the best 2-point defense in the country. Gonzaga needs to play inside out. Don't sleep on that game. And wake up from your pregame nap before that game, I guess I would say. I
will you name the wager. I'm ready to go.
I think I'm way behind on bets, so I gotta chill out on that. But
you owe me a handful of steaks, I believe.
A handful of steaks.
So we'll get into a whole podcast on Indiana and Mike Woodson and Minnesota and Shaka Smart and going to Marquette. And
whatever else comes up in the next.
What's the guy's name in Minnesota?
Oh,
Jacobson
Johnson, right?
Johnson,
Ben Johnson.
That and more fun. We'll get into. We'll do a transfer portal episode. I think. I have a lot of takes on Indiana. I have a lot of takes on my favorite whole deal with the Indiana search was the infighting amongst Indiana local media and then the local media versus the national media. It was all delicious, and I want to talk about
Those are the takes people need broken down. We also can talk about
we should have Osterman on for that
pod.
Should we have Osterman on for that pod?
We can get weird.
That's gonna be a 3-beer pod.
A three beer pod about the Indiana coaching search. That's must-see TV.
All right, we're getting out of here. Subscribe to UM Hoops. Dylan's doing awesome stuff and working his ass off, I might add, to turn stuff around on that one-day window for the UCLA prep stuff. So be so kind as to subscribe to UM Hoops and check out his awesome work. Subscribe to The Athletic. Read my profile on Howard Isley from last week. Read my column off of yesterday's game. Read the story that I have coming tomorrow, as long as my phone call at noon is answered by a certain story topic. So hopefully that gets turned around and turns out all right. We do appreciate you listening. Be sure to leave a review in the iTunes store and be sure to tip your bartenders and servers.